Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Jazakallahu khair for joining us tonight. We are having a webinar today about your guide to a healthful Ramadan. Our speaker today is Sister Hanifa Hameed. She is an RD and an LD. She's a graduate of King's College London and is a registered dietitian who has practiced in the UK and the USA for the past 20 years. She has been fortunate to have worked in many spheres of dietetics, both adult and pediatric, including home health and hospice and private practice. She has also had much clinical experience in various disciplines of nutrition and dietetics as a clinical dietitian and in management as assistant manager at Santa Monica, UCLA. She is passionate about health promotion with regards to using nutrition as a tool for health and has been active in this sphere for many years, giving lectures and workshops to the wider community. She's also a longtime MAS member of almost 20 years. Inshallah, I'll be letting Sister Hanifa take it away in just a minute. We'll be having this webinar will run for close to an hour, inshallah, and there will be time for questions at the end. Sister Hanifa, take it away.
Assalamu alaikum. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalam ala Rasulil Kareem. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Basically, the point of this webinar will be, inshallah, to provide you with some information that you may not have, but I'm sure most of you have researched a lot of things with regards to Ramadan and eating healthy, because it's something that's very, a very hot topic right now. So Ramadan's a time where, we have an opportunity to spiritually grow, mentally grow, and obviously grow with regards to our health and our nutrition. I apologize. So one of the things about fasting is fasting has been studied for many, many years now. And fasting has, in many journals has been studied and has been shown to have many, many benefits, such as reduction in weight, improving blood lipid levels, reduction in blood pressure. There's also an improvement in immunity, because when you're fasting, your body has a chance to actually slow down, and the energy that's used for digestion is then transferred to the growth and repair of the body. So with regard to the immunity, it gives a chance for the white blood cells to replenish, for our red blood cells to replenish also, and to also allow improved blood circulation and movement of oxygen throughout the body. Also in a couple of the psychiatric journals, they studied that the concept of fasting also allows for a better mental well-being, and actually has shown evidence to reduce symptoms of anxiety. The reason for this is that when we fast, endorphins are released by our body slowly as the fast progresses. And those endorphins increase our levels of happiness, as it were. And also what they do is they allow the anxiety and depression symptoms to decrease. And as I mentioned before, there's a time for the body to grow and repair. So it's also been studied in cancer patients, where they've looked at the fact that fasting has actually resulted in protection of the cells that are not cancerous. And actually, what it also does is it helps with patients with regards to chemotherapy. So it reduces the toxicity of chemotherapy in patients that are undergoing that set of treatment. So it prevents damage to the normal cells, but it hasn't yet been shown to affect the cancer cells themselves, but it allows the cancer cells to be affected by the chemotherapy rather than the fasting affecting the cancer cells. And also the additional benefit is that there's been no harmful benefits yet studied with regards to short-term fasting, particularly the type of fasting that we do in Islam, which allows us to have a source of nourishment, after the hours of daylight. So what happens when we fast? When we're fasting, our bodies don't receive a regular source of energy. So the body has to find other pathways to get that energy. So the first source of energy that your body uses is carbohydrate. And this runs out. This doesn't happen immediately. This usually happens like a week or so into fasting. For some people, even shorter. But the body starts turning to fat as a source of energy. And usually, when there is no food available, then the body goes to protein and breaks that down, and that results in muscle breakdown, things like that. But the fact that we break our fast, that actually prevents the muscle from being broken down, which is actually a preventative measure and a safety measure for our body, because we don't go into the starvation stage. But despite this, it's important to consider that our bodies do suffer from some of the minor symptoms or side effects of fasting. Now, that's not a result of the fasting itself. That's a result of possibly, sleep deprivation, dehydration, inadequate diet, and things like that. So it's extremely important that you have a balanced, nutritious, hydrated meal, or have hydration with your meal, that will ensure that these minor temporary side effects don't happen and don't exist. So the balanced diet includes, the addition of complex carbohydrates, particularly soluble fibers, protein as a major component of the diet, and healthy fats. People tend to get worried about, using fats, but fats are essential for our bodily function, particularly brain function. So it's important to have fats within the diet, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. And then vitamins and minerals are a very essential source of nutrition within the fast, because they are electrolytes, and they ensure that we have in the minerals to remain hydrated. So, primary goals during fasting is to ensure that you're hydrated. Particularly, in these summer months that our fasts are in right now, it's very, very crucial that we are hydrated, because, I've heard of stories in the past when, encouraged to fast and stuff, they don't drink enough. And they've been in the prayers, and they've ended up, fainting. And this is mainly due to dehydration, but also it can be as a result of inadequate intake as well. According to the Institute of Medicine, it's recommended that men drink about 13 cups of water a day, and women about 8 to 9 cups. And the reason for this is because of the muscle mass that men tend to have more of compared to women. So women tend to need to drink less, but if you're exercising or you're out a lot during the hot summer days, either working or doing some sort of activity outside, which you don't have a choice in, it's important to increase your fluid intake. I will particularly refer to water as being your fluid intake, but as I will mention later, there are many things that can contribute to the fluid intake. But as I mentioned, if you are exercising or you are outdoors for a long period of time, it's important to increase that fluid intake by about 1.5 to 2.5 cups a day. Now, the way to do that, it's difficult, obviously. We cannot do that during the day. So it's very, very important that you're ensuring sufficient hydration when you have the opportunity to eat, so during your meals. So that is particularly during the suhoor meal, during the iftar meal, and during the night between tarawih and if you get up for tahajjud and things like that. So it's important to keep, a bottle of water with you during tarawih. And this, alhamdulillah, now a lot of the masajids, what they do is they provide water for, a lot of the people that come for the prayer. So it's important, to have water, throughout your prayer if you possibly can. Just keep the water bottle next to you. But I will say this, let's not put pressure on our masajids, because they are providing us with water bottles. So we can always bring our own water with us, so that we can have our own, water with us to hydrate ourselves. Another thing that's useful to do is, a lot of us will get up for tahajjud and, for qiyam al-layl and things like that. So it's water. You do wake up, for night as well, help to ensure that you meet your 8 to 9 cups for women and 13 cups for men. And the benefit of drinking water meals is that it allows the absorption of the electrolytes. It allows the electrolytes from our food allow water to be absorbed by our kidneys, and this is extremely important because it allows the water balance, to exist in our bodies. And the benefit of drinking water with the meals is it aids in digestion. I know there's a lot of, I've researched this a little bit, and from my understanding, people water during, water a small amount during your meal does aid in digestion. And when you've been fasting all day and your bowels are inactive, the benefit of drinking water is that it allows the gut to keep moving. And again, I will bring this up later, but starting your soup and fluid gets the gut moving, and it gently allows it to get moving rather than having to immediately digest, some food. So water aids with the digestion, as I said, and in addition, also prevents constipation, which in turn prevents issues such as hemorrhoids and the feeling of bloatedness, which a lot of us get during Ramadan because all of a sudden we're eating a lot more than, we have been throughout the day. I apologize, right back. Okay, so as I said, foods that are beneficial, particularly for hydration, are soups, which we should try to start with. So soups can be utilized in the suhoor meal as well. But the good thing to do when you're having soups and salads is obviously the use of vegetables. When you're adding vegetables to any of these meals and adding it to things like soups and having salads, you're increasing the water content of your meal. So things like salads, lettuce, spinach, kale, celery, cucumbers, and obviously they provide vitamins and minerals as well to the meal. The other thing, which is not necessarily a vegetable, but sometimes it is, but is actually a fruit, is adding tomatoes. They're very high in water, and they're also high in vitamins and minerals, but they're also high in something called lichen, which is useful and beneficial with regards to hand or so eating tomatoes generally is beneficial with regards to lycopene, but they are in as part of your meal. But also adding other vegetables to your meal, such as radish, eggplant, part of a meal as a stew or eating it as a dish is very, very important. I would actually say that having your vegetables should contribute to about half of your plate. And again, this is beneficial with regards to reducing the amount of calories. I feel that dietetics, they're known as free foods because they're very low in calories but high in a lot of nutrients. And in this case, obviously, water. Fruits that are very, very beneficial and that are high in water are things such as watermelon. Now, the Prophet ﷺ would actually combine water with dates. He would eat them together. Now, the reason being for this is that dates are considered hot foods, and watermelon is actually considered a cold food. So what tends to happen is when you combine watermelon and dates, you actually get with regards to the heat of the food. Pulls the body down, particularly in the situation of fasting. So when you are breaking your meal, the sunnah is to break the with dates, but also include water. The Prophet ﷺ would actually break his fast with dates. Now, this in itself has a lot of science, which I will go into, but the, subhanAllah, the practice scientific method many years ago, and without necessarily showing the scientific benefit. A lot of people are using coconut water nowadays. This can actually be very beneficial. Water is the best, but there's nothing wrong with using things like coconut water, which are actually low in calories and also are high in electrolytes. So it's a good substitute for Gatorade. Gatorade usually I would avoid using because of the colorings and the preservatives sometimes that are added to certain hydrating type drinks. Another thing to avoid, one of the important things to avoid during Ramadan is actually to avoid caffeine, because it's actually a diuretic. So it actually makes you urinate more, and as a result, what you end up doing is you end up. But the thing is, it's effective. So it's going to affect your and your physical ability. Now, if you haven't already, I would suggest start weaning off even now. There's still time. There's roughly a week for Ramadan starts. So still start weaning off. If you can't completely wean off, at least 2 cups of tea or 3 cups of coffee a day, start weaning off now to try to at least cut down to at least 1 if you can't completely cut it out. Because as I said, it is a diuretic, it will affect your hydration levels during the day and contribute to headaches and migraines, because people are used to it, and as a result they can't get off it. So in that situation, hydration is very important. And don't use sodas and these things as a method of hydration. You see a lot of kids in the massages going to vending machines and chugging down soda, sweet, country lemonade and stuff like that. These things are actually useless because they're just very, very high in sugar. And they'll actually dehydrate more. So again, avoiding foods and drinks that are high in sugar is paramount to ensure hydration. And also avoiding foods that are high in salt, such as sauces, canned foods, deli meat, salty nuts, things like that. Also, based on their cultural diets, do consume very, very spicy foods. Now, that's a matter of taste, but spicy foods do increase your thirst. So if you are wanting to consume spicy foods, it's important to ensure that you're drinking plenty of water with those meals that you're having to ensure that you're properly hydrated and not thirsty. Okay, so now we're going to go down to the nitty-gritty of the meals itself. Suhoor is one of the sugar levels, and that will result in things like headaches, nausea, fatigue, and even lack of concentration. So it's very, very important to ensure that you have suhoor. Now, if you can't have suhoor, try to have at least small meals through the night. So, for example, have a meal after Taraweeh. Not a snack, I would say a small meal, and that will aid in if you're not able to eat too much at one time during the actual suhoor time. And another advice about suhoor is, people give themselves very little time, or they sometimes have very little time. So they tend to eat very fast, and now that results in indigestion. So it's important to eat as slowly as you possibly can so that you're able to digest and chew the food well. And also try not to overeat. Have meals that are nutrient dense, that have the complex carbohydrates and have the the nutrients that your body will need throughout the day. So that means avoiding foods that are high in fat, that are fried, that are sugary or processed, because these are just low in nutrients. And what they do is, particularly the sugar, they are broken down a lot quicker, which creates the high peaks in blood sugar, low sugar level. So that just leaves beneficial to you at all. So it's important to ensure that you're having foods that are high in complex carbohydrates, protein. Now, a good example of this, or a good example of a suhoor meal, that you can have something like oatmeal. And you can add nuts, which have good fats, chia seeds, flax seeds, which are high in omega-3 fatty acids, raisins. Now, the Prophet ﷺ would actually make a drink from soaked raisins called nabiz, and he would usually drink that either in the suhoor or even iftar. Now, that is something that is easy to do. You just have to soak the raisins after maybe come home after Tarawih and soak the raisins overnight until suhoor time, and then you can actually drink that water and use the raisins, maybe put it into a smoothie at suhoor or something. Now, what you can do in addition to for example, the oatmeal, as I mentioned, is it's important to also have a protein source. So having things such as scrambled egg, boiled eggs, whatever you prefer, is actually beneficial because it provides a source of protein. And the protein allows you to, it keeps you full longer, and it allows a slower release of blood sugars throughout the day. A lot of people ask about whether they should have vitamins and whether they're necessary. In general, vitamins are not necessary if you're having a well-balanced meal with all the food components that are necessary. But if you feel that there are, things that you're missing out on from a nutrient perspective, having a multivitamin could be beneficial and could be useful. But it's not necessary unless you are, your doctor has suggested it because you're anemic or you're vitamin D deficient or something like that, in which case you should continue with that recommendation. And as I mentioned before, if you are having a hard time having suhoor, there's plenty of things you can do in between Tarawih and suhoor. And, as I said, don't have snack items, but actually have food items such as, cottage cheese, hummus, guacamole, nut butter on whole wheat toast with some fruit on top, such as bananas or something like that, and smoothies. And then maybe you can have something very, very small at the suhoor time itself. And that will keep you going throughout your day of fasting. Now, the Prophet ﷺ actually would, at suhoor time, would consume a porridge made with barley and milk and honey called talbina. And porridge made from barley is actually a very good source of soluble fiber, which will keep you going throughout the day because it's digested slowly and it allows the sugars from the carbohydrate, being the barley, to be released slowly throughout the day, so it keeps you going. So again, wisdom in the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and following his sunnah allows us to also benefit and make our lives a little easier, especially when it comes to the fasting. So now when you break your fast, it's important to break it gradually. Again, if you overeat very, very quickly, you'll feel bloated, you'll feel nauseated, you'll feel very full very, very quickly, and you probably won't be able to get much in. So as I mentioned before, it's important to begin your fast with dates and then with water, as the Rasul ﷺ did. And then maybe start with a small appetizer. That will hydrate you, such as, as I mentioned before, soups and salads, and even like a yogurt drink. Nowadays you find them in the stores, but you can make yourself a yogurt drink with some light yogurt with some mint, and put it in the blender, and that's like a yogurt mint smoothie. And the mint itself helps to reduce muscle spasms in the stomach and allows for better digestion. And again, the Prophet ﷺ would consume barley at iftar time, but this time he would consume it in the form of a broth with wheat. For those of you that eat halim or the halim type of stews, it was very, very similar to that. It had wheat and barley, and even lentils, and these things can be beneficial. I know some people suffer from gas issues and things like that if there's beans in these things, but barley actually is very, very useful for digestion. And I know when I was growing up, my father, when we were sick, would always make us a barley stew with just honey and barley and water. And it would be, particularly if we had a bad stomach, that's something he would make for us all the time. And it really was beneficial towards our digestion and alleviating stomach issues. Now, the other thing is, as I mentioned, break your fast gradually. So what you need to do is have your small appetizers with the dates and meal. Now, when I'm talking about appetizers, I'm not talking about foods that are fried or, things. Avoid those. I'm not saying you can't have your sambusas or samosas or pakoras or, your fried items once in a while. That's totally okay. But on a regular basis, it will result in indigestion and things like that, and bloating. And in addition, having these on a regular basis, which we normally don't do, will obviously result in weight gain. So after you've had your initial breaking of the fast, it's a good practice to then go pray and then return to have your actual meal. Now, what this does is it gives your stomach time to actually adjust to the fact that food is going in. So you don't get the muscle spasms and the pain and bloating associated with overeating at one point or at one time. And the stomach has been inactive and at rest the whole day, so it gives it time to adjust. Now, what I want to actually talk about, which I think is very important, is actually the benefits of dates. There is wisdom in the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam consuming dates, and the fact that dates are mentioned many, many times in the Quran as a beneficial food. Dates are actually fast-acting carbohydrates. Now, in general, simple carbohydrates are known as fast-acting carbohydrates, and usually I would suggest not consuming those. But dates contain a special type of soluble fiber called D-glucan, which actually allows the gut to, and the digestive system to start moving. And also, they're an immediate source of glucose to the brain. And they provide continuous energy because they also contain sucrose and fructose. And in addition to that, they're also extremely high in electrolytes, more than most other fruits out there, such as magnesium, potassium. It actually contains more potassium than bananas do. And it also has some sodium, which are all very, very important for hydration. And then in addition to that, it's high in iron. So if you have issues with anemia, consuming dates are very, very useful. They have manganese, copper, and selenium, which is important for strong blood and bones. And they contain B vitamins, which is important for energy production. So the food you are going to be eating will be utilized well and will provide your body with energy. So when you're going for Tarawih, it'll allow you to have the energy that your body needs. So when we're consuming water and dates together, again, wisdom. It allows our body to be hydrated much, much faster. And if you think about it, it's a natural form of Gatorade because it has all the minerals that are usually found in Gatorade and more. And it has other vitamins and minerals that are beneficial for our body's well-being. And the other benefit is that the special type of soluble fiber, the D-glucan, has been shown to improve digestive health by actually treating upset stomachs and increasing the good bacteria in the stomach. SubhanAllah, if you think about it, we don't actually have to refrigerate the dates. So there must be something in there that allows them to be preserved without going rotten. Of course, the sugar level, but also that fiber that's in it is beneficial because it has something that allows good bacteria to flourish and prevents the bad bacteria from multiplying. And in addition to, the promotion of dates in the Quran and, the use by the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, there's many, many studies that have shown that dates are considered a complete food because of everything that they contain. And some studies have shown that if you consume 3 dates a day, again, subhanAllah, the consumption of an odd number of dates, and if we're consuming it for a month, because we're going to be consuming dates every day for a month, studies by the Harvard School of Public Health have actually shown that it helps to lower the bad cholesterol, the LDL cholesterol in our bloodstream, by binding to the fat in the digestive tract. So just in a basic food, it has all the nutrients that our body possibly needs, and it allows us to benefit from a cardiovascular perspective, provides us with energy, and provides us with a complete source of nutrition right there. So, I mean, to be honest, Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, a lot of the time when you read about him in the seerah and the foods he would consume, he wouldn't consume, his diet was not very varied because, of the availability as well. And a lot of the time they were drinking milk, water, and consuming dates. The Prophet ﷺ actually said that a home with no dates is like a home with no food. SubhanAllah, that actually reiterates the fact that this food is a complete food. And, you could actually just survive with that and, fluids such as milk and water, as I mentioned. Now, there's another type of food that I also want to bring up, which again has, several mentions in the Quran, which is figs. They are very, very similar to dates with regards to the content of fiber and minerals. And but they also have something that they actually have something that is very beneficial with regards to hypertension, high blood pressure. They allow the body to restore balance in the body. They're actually very high in potassium, but low in sodium. So when we have a high consumption of sodium, or we're suffering from hypertension, it helps to restore the potassium sodium balance, which allows the body to actually reach an equilibrium and therefore help with regards to lowering blood pressure. In addition to this, just as dates are, they're a natural laxative as well. And studies have shown that they actually help with digestive issues such as irritable bowel syndrome. And there's studies right now that are looking into the use of dates with regards to other digestive issues. Also, they're a high source of antioxidants and polyphenols that are important for removing free radical toxins, which actually break down cells and damage them. And another benefit of figs are they're considered an alkaline food. So when you have not eaten the entire day and you consume figs as part of your iftar meal, what they do is they help to reduce the acidity in your stomach, and in effect reduce the pH, so that you don't suffer from heartburn and things like that. But in general, it's very, very important to consume whole foods like fruit and vegetables, which generally provide hydration and allow the gastric juices to flow and overall provide electrolytes. And this in itself is beneficial to the whole process of digestion. Okay, so now the next thing I want to look at is, I've had a lot of questions, people asking me what sort of things they should eat during iftar and during the suhoor meals. So what I want to go into is actually the different food groups and how we can incorporate them as part of a healthy iftar and suhoor. Now, as I mentioned before, it's important to reduce the amount of simple sugars or simple carbohydrates in the meals. And these are things such as white bread, white rice, things like that. You need to particularly reduce the portions of that, because what they do is they just absorb very, very quickly, and they just create highs and lows in blood sugars, which doesn't benefit you and doesn't keep you full. So it's important, as I mentioned before, to have foods that are high in complex carbohydrates, which will keep you feeling full a lot longer. So these include things like barley, as I mentioned, wheat. Now, if you choose not to have that because you prefer to be on a gluten-free diet, whether medically or that are gluten-free, such as quinoa. I love quinoa. Quinoa is an amazing grain. It's actually high in protein, high in complex carbohydrates. It does have carbohydrates, but it's lower in carbohydrates as a whole because it takes a lot more to digest. And it's not a very heavy grain, so you don't feel overfull. And as I mentioned before, you can incorporate oats as part of your suhoor meal, but it can also be used to make a savory porridge. My mom actually likes using oats and makes a savory porridge with it at iftar. And sometimes she'll add some chicken to it, or sometimes she'll just make it by itself with some lentils. And so like basically a vegetarian halim, really. And that's actually the option as necessary. But the other thing that are very useful forms of complex carbohydrates are the fruit and vegetables. So adding those is also a form of complex carbohydrates in addition to being a form of hydration. Now, when it comes to things such as lentils and beans, I know a lot of people have complaints with regards to feeling very gaseous. So a way to prevent that or to help with that is to add probiotics before and after a meal. So adding things such as, an over-the-counter probiotic can be very, very useful, but also having apple cider vinegar, which is a powerful source of probiotics, can be beneficial. Now, there's different ways of having that. Some people can have it straight. My son loves having it straight, whereas some people can, you can dilute it with water and drink it. That's a matter of preference and ability to have it because it is quite strong. But it's also important to have these complex carbohydrates because they help with regards to constipation, particularly if your routine has been altered in the first few weeks of Ramadan when, we have changes in hydration and things like that. So when you're consuming these foods, it's very, very important to ensure that you are having fluid intake with that, particularly water, because the hydration will help to alleviate issues such as constipation. And also, as I mentioned before, hydration is important with regards to also alleviating issues such as migraines and things like that. But, as I mentioned again, that certain foods that are considered simple carbohydrates, such as dates and figs, are very, very important because they help the body recover quickly from the day of fasting and restore blood sugar levels and electrolyte levels very, very quickly. So it's very, very important. I know I've been talking for a while, but if anyone, I'm not sure if we have the capability to do that, but if you guys have any questions while I'm talking, I'm more than willing to ask them. If not, we can just have the questions at the end. Okay, now, as I mentioned before, one of the most important parts of the meals, of the suhoor meal and the iftar meal, is actually protein. Again, protein should be about a quarter of your plate, if not more. I would say maybe a little bit more than a quarter of your plate, but then if you are going to consume more than a quarter of your plate, look for lean proteins, such as, fish, chicken, also things such as beans and lentils, legumes, which what I do want to mention with regards to beans and lentils and these things are that it's useful to consume them as a whole group of things rather than individually, because these are what are known as incomplete proteins. So when you consume them on their own, they have certain amino acids that are missing that don't allow them to be a whole protein. So they're not necessarily used by the body as a whole protein for growth and repair and of the muscle and tissues in our body. So it's important to consume them. So if having a bean stew or a bean casserole, something along those lines is what will help make that a complete protein meal. But also adding things such as nuts and seeds, particularly, after Tarawih, if you're not having a full suhoor meal, will be useful because, again, they're a good source of protein and they're a good source of healthy fats as well. I know some people like their red meat. I don't think there's anything wrong with having red meat, particularly if there's issues with anemia and things like that. But please try to go for the lean meats and avoid, adding fat to them. So when you're cooking, in your cooking methods, avoid frying things and, maybe just lightly saute, beef, for example, something like that, and go for the lean cuts as much as you can. Because the idea is to still remain healthy as much as possible. And these are the guidelines that you would use in a normal healthy diet anyway. And you're ensuring a good energy source, but at the same time, you're not overeating and having excessive amounts of calories. Okay, so now going to the fats. Fats are extremely important as part of our meal. And as I mentioned before, the source of fat that you use is what's beneficial or detrimental to your health. So having fats that are high in DHA, EPA, eicosapentaenoic acid, which are found in fish oils, are very, very beneficial to brain function and memory. So particularly in Ramadan, when we're using our brains more when it comes to memorization of the Quran, reading the Quran, having to stay up, and participate in the Tarawih, and mentally be there in the Tarawih. These things are very, very useful, to have as part of a meal. So incorporating fish, particularly what's known as the fatty fishes, such as sardines, salmon, sea bass, ahi-ahi, are very, very useful. And then the other benefit of them is that they help to reduce inflammation. So now when our bodies are at rest, as I said before, what they do is they go into a mode of repair and rejuvenation. So when we're consuming these foods, their iftar, for example, what they do is they help in the process of reducing inflammation by ensuring adequate repair of our cells. And the reason that they do this is they contain what's known as the ACE vitamins, vitamin A, C, E, and selenium and zinc, and as I mentioned before, the omega-3 fatty acids. And certain fruits and vegetables also contain the ACE vitamins as well, and the minerals that are necessary to reduce inflammation and promote cell generation. And the use of certain oils, an example is, cold-pressed extra virgin olive oil, are also good sources of omega-9 fatty acids, which in studies have been shown to reduce the LDL cholesterol and increase the HDL cholesterol, which again has an antioxidant and anti-inflammatory effect. The concept of the Mediterranean diet, you find the people in these countries, particularly that consume these diets, have lower levels of heart disease because of the fact that they have low levels of the bad cholesterol and high levels of the good cholesterol, the HDL cholesterol. And subhanAllah, the Prophet ﷺ would eat olives as often as he could. And he actually, as narrated by Tirmidhi, he actually said, eat the olive and use it as an ointment as it comes from a blessed tree. So again, there's religious benefits in it and there's nutritional benefits in it. So it's, again, we need to go back to our sources, which is the Sunnah, the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and, the knowledge and the divine knowledge that they had, the prophets particularly, and, go back to that and use that as a source of our information when it comes to eating healthy and eating well. And as I mentioned before, just, as much as you can, avoid frying and avoid having foods that are just generally high in fat, because they're non-nutritive. They don't have any nutrients that are beneficial to the body, all they'll do is just increase your weight and create a situation where you'll have indigestion and gas. And a lot of people tend to skip dairy because they feel like they're bloated, or that they feel like, it may make them gain weight or things like that, or they feel their mouth is very dry, things like that. So what is important to do is have that as part of a meal. So having things such as yogurt, cottage cheese, for example, at suhoor time, having it as part of a smoothie. I tend to put the milk and Greek yogurt into a smoothie with, chia seeds and flax seeds, and then adding, fruits in it as part of my suhoor meal, which gives me that, that extra dose of vitamins and minerals and protein, and also the dose of calcium that I need. Now, it's very, very important to ensure that you are having calcium, because there is a risk of minor bone loss, especially if you're very, very active. Now, especially if you're going to be exercising during Ramadan. Now, an example that I gave before was a smoothie, but another example is that you could make, for example, a Greek yogurt parfait and add things such as chia, source of fiber, and flax seeds, again, a source of fiber and omega-3 fatty acids, and add things like strawberries or raspberries, blackberries, blueberries, whatever type of berries you have. Again, they're very high in antioxidants, and they're a good source of vitamins and minerals. And then another good thing to add that's beneficial, and again, not overconsumption, but a small amount is good, is raw unfiltered honey, particularly the black dark honey that people usually talk about, because it's a good source of phytochemicals and flavonoids, which are powerful antioxidants, actually, which have an anti-inflammatory and immune system benefit. And in addition to that, honey has a beneficial antibacterial effect as well. Now, honey is mentioned in the Quran, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that there comes forth from the bee's belly a drink of varying colors, wherein is a healing for men. So, I mean, most of you, I'm sure, know about this, that, it has its antibacterial effects topically and orally. So, a lot of people particularly use it when they have sore throats. I tend to use it with black seed oil and honey when my kids are sick or when I'm sick, and it really is beneficial in that regard. Now, when it comes to exercising in Ramadan, it's you have to progress with caution, and you have to know what to do. But to some extent, there is an individual aspect to this. If you've been exercising for a very long time and you have tried and tested things during Ramadan in the past, and it works for you, then you can stick to that. But if it's something new that you're going to be taking on, then it's important to bear in mind when are the best times to do it. Exercising itself in Ramadan helps you to maintain your weight, and what it does is, if you're totally inactive, your body breaks down muscle. So it allows you to prevent muscle breakdown exercising, and aids in the digestion process as well, particularly if your bowel's been very inactive throughout the day. So even if it just means walking around the block, if you're not used to exercising generally, even if you're just walking around the block for a brisk walk after iftar, or if you decide to go to the gym after Tarawih, which is actually the best time to weight train, because your body actually has had a source of food, protein, and a source of fluids, which is important when you're weight training, because if you don't have a source of protein, then the cortisol levels in your body increase, and you actually end up breaking down muscle, which is what you want to prevent. And fluid is very, very important, because the lack of fluid actually reduces the strength of the muscles. So as much as you can train, if you're going to weight train, do it after Tarawih. But you can also do it after iftar, so after you've had a meal, and then you have some time before going for Tarawih. But when it comes to a cardio workout, the best time has actually been shown to be just before Fajr. But you can, again, do a quick cardio workout after iftar as well. But again, ensure that, you are well hydrated and you have had, a good source of protein and energy if you are going to exercise after iftar. For me, in the past, I used to exercise straight after suhoor because that was easiest and most, I found that the easiest time for me. I'd actually get tired throughout the rest of the day. But even after iftar, I'd be very, very tired. So that would be the best time for me. But if you do it straight after suhoor, there doesn't seem to be any harm associated with it because you've just had, a source of protein and fluids. But it's not a good idea to wait at that point. Probably a short cardio workout is beneficial, but not something long because you will feel thirsty after that point if it's a very long workout. Now, I'm going to briefly go through the special cases when it comes to fasting. In general, the mashayikh say that there is no need to fast if you are diabetic, particularly if you're insulin controlled, and if you're taking, if your diabetes is not well controlled. But some people choose to fast if they're either controlled by diet or tablets, because they can adjust if they're able to, with the consultation of their doctor, able to adjust their medication regimen. That allows them to fast throughout the day, then they can go ahead and fast. But again, I would say consult with your doctor before you go ahead and take on something like this. There have been people, I have had patients that have actually fasted while taking insulin. Now that can be possible. I mean, I wouldn't suggest it, but it can be possible if you can ensure that you have a high a meal that is high in complex carbohydrates and which has a low glycemic index, which allows the food to be slowly released into your bloodstream throughout the day. But what you need to do is you need to constantly measure your blood sugars throughout the day, because there is a possibility of drops in blood sugar. But again, this is something that I would suggest you consult with your doctor before you go ahead and do, because there are consequences to doing this, which can result in very, very low blood sugars and can be detrimental to your health. And again, with respect to the fasting, it is not necessary to put yourself in danger with regards to your health when it comes to that. But if you do choose to fast and your diet controlled, it's important to, as I said, ensure that you have a high intake of complex carbohydrates at suhoor and iftar, and ensure that you are well hydrated. I've also had patients that have chosen to fast while they're pregnant during Ramadan. Again, it is not necessary, and again, I would suggest you consult with your doctor if you choose to do so. But do ensure that you are, again, having a good source of complex carbohydrates throughout the day, throughout your suhoor and iftar, and again, plenty of fluids. But again, most people are discouraged from actually fasting while they're pregnant, because when there is fluid deprivation, it actually affects the fluid that surrounds the baby in the womb. So overall, you're recommended not to be fasting, because at the end, it may not be as detrimental to your health, but it can be detrimental to the baby's health. And ensure that you are taking your supplements of folic acid and vitamin D throughout, the fasting period, if you do choose to fast. Again, I will reiterate the fact that I don't think it could be detrimental to the baby's health, so it is better not to fast in that situation. Now, people with well-controlled high blood pressure can fast. Again, if they need medication, then the doctor can actually, prescribe the medication, and they can have it at timings outside the period of fasting. And that can work very, very well with, no issues. But it's important to ensure that you're having plenty of fluid. And as I mentioned before, the fruit and vegetables that are high in electrolytes, potassium, and magnesium, and these things are very, very beneficial to the blood pressure. So ensure that you're having plenty of fruit and vegetables throughout your suhoor and in iftar meal. and this will allow you to maintain the electrolyte balance. People with low blood pressure, again, there's no issues with fasting, but again, hydration is paramount and key, and the use of fruit and vegetables, again, it's very, very beneficial with regards to providing sodium, potassium, magnesium, all of the electrolytes that are necessary to keep your blood pressure at a good level. And in this situation, if your blood pressure is very, very low, generally I would say not to consume too many fruit juices and things like that. But if you are susceptible to low blood sugars at the point of iftar, it's beneficial sometimes to have some juice or something like that to help increase the blood pressure if you're feeling faint or something like that, because it can increase the sodium and potassium levels. But as I mentioned before, dates and water, having those is a perfect way to ensure that your electrolyte levels are on par, and that will help with your blood pressure levels as well. So I will bring in a couple of other things that usually create issues during Ramadan. And those are things, people suffering from muscle cramps, headaches, and, feeling dizzy and things like that. Now, I'll bring up the part about feeling dizzy, which is associated with low blood pressure particularly. So if you are feeling dizzy and things like that, ensure, as I said, plenty of fluids, plenty of fruit and vegetables, but also avoid doing excessive amounts of exercise. So do light cardiac exercises, because that will increase things such as postural hypertension, which increases the dizziness and things like that. And cramps and things like that. A lot of people say they experience muscle cramps during their fasting time. This again is related or can be related to the lack of hydration and the lack of electrolytes in your body. So if you're ensuring, and I'm repeating this again because it is so important, if you're ensuring that you're having plenty of fruit and vegetables and plenty of water throughout the suhoor and iftar meals and in between during Taraweeh, then you're going to prevent those things such as the muscle cramps from happening, and also things such as headaches, because again, you're ensuring the hydration. But one of the things that usually contributes to people's headaches is caffeine withdrawal, because they've been having caffeine, they're used to having caffeine on a regular basis. This usually gets better throughout the fast, but generally it helps with regards to headaches and that sort of thing. So when you're weaning off these, this will help towards avoiding headaches due to caffeine. Okay, so now I guess this is the time for questions. So I'm not sure how we're going to go ahead and do this, but I'm open for questions.
Jazakallahu khair, Sister Hanifa, for the very informative presentation. If anybody has any questions, please type them into the chat box. I can also, you can ask unmuted and ask your question out loud as well. Are there any questions for Sister Hanifa?
Either I was boring or I gave you too much information.
No, alhamdulillah, it was very good information. And I believe if you would like to unmute yourself, you can use *6 to unmute yourself if you're calling in from a phone.
While we're waiting for questions, I can actually just bring up a couple of studies that were done in the past. There's a lot of studies that have been done, talking about the benefits of fasting generally. And what a lot of the studies show is that, fasting itself is a cleanse. So it gives the body time to rest and digest and absorb food well. But what it also does is it gives it time to grow and repair and allows renewal of the body. So when it comes to things such as cancer and things like that, it's actually shown that it benefits, the growth. Prevents the growth, helps in prevention of growth of, the bad cells and renews the cells that are not too necrotic.
If anybody would like to unmute themselves, it should be working now. Dial *6 if you're calling in from a phone, and you should be able to unmute your question, inshallah. It looks like we may not have any questions right now.
Okay.
Do you have any other information to share?
If anyone has any questions that they may not be able to think of right now, I've actually put up my email and phone number, and you can feel free to call me, text me about questions for healthy eating in Ramadan, and with regards to anything else if you wish as well. I'm more than happy to answer questions with regards to anything nutritional, I guess.
Okay, well, it looks like there are no questions at this time. Jazakallahu khair for everybody who joined in today, and also Jazakallahu khair for Sister Hanifa for your wonderful presentation. This session has been recorded and will inshallah be available to watch again at a future date if you'd like to watch it again or share it with anybody to share this important information about nutrition during Ramadan. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر جزاك الله خير.
السلام عليكم.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.